Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Fascinating topic today around cybersecurity and medical devices, an important topic for everyone with Vigilant Ops. Ken, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great for a Friday. Dog days of summer here in Boston. A
Yeah.
little humid, but otherwise really excited to have this chat. It's so timely as we look around and see all these data breaches and cybersecurity issues. What's the impact on what's near and dear to us, those medical devices that many of us know and use, or at least have family members, friends that use? So before all that, maybe jump in, introduce yourself, and a little bit about an overview of Vigilant.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And Evan, and first of all, thank you for having me. It's an important topic, as you just suggested. I always like to say we're all consumers of healthcare at some point, and
Mm.
it's a really disturbing thing that hospitals keep getting breached. So we'll dive into that. But first, let me introduce myself. So my name is Ken Zalewski. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Vigilant Ops. My background is technology. I grew up as a software developer. Was my first gig out of school. And kind of got into the medical device world and spent about 20 years at Bayer in cybersecurity. And so learned on the front lines, really kind of the weaknesses and the things that were happening on medical devices and the fact that, we really hadn't deployed advanced technology into that space. And so I thought there was a great opportunity there. I thought I could help a lot. And really the mission of Vigilant Ops is really to help. And we want to, at the end of the day, we're all about protecting patients. I mean, that was Bayer's mission, and that continues to be my mission at Vigilant, is to protect patients, but this time from a security perspective. And so Vigilant, what we do is we automate what's called the software bill of materials lifecycle management. And for folks that don't know what that is, a software bill of materials is very easy to explain. It's analogous to a list of ingredients on a food label. So if you pick up a box of cereal and you flip it over, you see what's inside that. The ingredients are listed right on the back, and that's really helpful from an allergen perspective or other things, right? I mean, if you didn't know the ingredients in some food, you might be hesitant to eat it. Well, this is the conundrum that hospitals are facing today. They can't flip over a medical device and look at the components that are inside. They don't know what software is running in a medical device. And so they deploy these medical devices to the networks basically as black boxes, right? And so the
Mm.
risk is extremely high because at any point in time, those components, those software components that are being used in that device could have vulnerabilities, and most actually do. And so if you don't know what's running to begin with, how do you know what's vulnerable, which you don't? And so then how do you protect yourself, which you can? And so that's the conundrum that hospitals face. And what we're doing with the software bill of materials is we're making that whole life cycle easy to manage and automate. So we want to make it really, really simple for device manufacturers to create software bill of materials and provide those to their consumer hospitals and their customers so that they can actually see what's running in the devices and protect themselves ahead of time. So the whole thing is becoming more proactive. We want to get out ahead of the curve, ahead of the vulnerabilities, make hospitals aware where they're vulnerable in a much, much more efficient manner, and provide information really, frankly, they couldn't get up until the software bill of materials.
Oh, such an interesting and timely topic. And also, why now? Why have SBOMs, I don't know if you call them software bombs, but why have they become such a critical component of cybersecurity? And what is it about the healthcare industry, besides the obvious that you don't want patients to be killed or suffer from various software defects, but why has this come to the fore?
That's a great question. I mean, so I started actually working with FDA back in 2018, and we
Mm.
started to look at software bill of materials as a security artifact that could really kind of dig into the transparency of a medical device, and realizing that one of the problems when you deploy a device is not knowing where you're vulnerable, and then starting all the way back to not knowing what components you have in there. It seemed like SBOM seemed like a kind of a common sense way to go. If we could start to provide this information to hospitals directly from the source. So we call the medical device manufacturer the source of truth, providing that information to the hospital, then they can equip themselves to react more proactively. And so, as I said, back in 2018, I started to work with FDA on the idea of SBOM, and roll forward to today. And it's just become, kind of a almost the de facto standard when you come to security documentation, especially in MedTech. Other industries are adopting it. If you think about other industries, every industry, every vertical, I mean, we're all surrounded at all times by computers everywhere, right? So, and all these computers are running software, and all these software components are vulnerable. So across all industries, you've got this same need. And so software bill of materials is just kind of ubiquitous. It's the way to kind of transparently communicate this information. Again, no matter what the system is, we happen to be in MedTech, and that's kind of our specialty. But looking across industries, it really applies everywhere. And if you back up to your question of why now, so FDA realized this is really going to move the industry forward and help secure devices in a bigger way. And so they actually went to the government and got permission to amend the FD&C Act. So the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was amended at the end of last year to include information FDA can collect from device manufacturers, and that would be software bill of materials. So now in MedTech specifically, FDA has legislative authority to require the software bill of materials. So that's why you see that compliance movement in MedTech. And I think other industries are moving along. Executive Order 14028, signed by President Biden in 2021, gave the government that same requirement to ask their vendors for software bill of materials. So almost everywhere you look, software bill of materials is kind of making its way to the fore as this kind of de facto security document. And so I think that's what you're seeing today, a combination of legislation and consumers kind of waking up and saying, hey, I need to know what's in there, and asking for the software bill of materials.
Fantastic. So you have these standards and new requirements in terms of compliance. But what's next? Once you get a bill of materials, what's the action item? What's the next step in analyzing risks or defects or loopholes or what have you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at it, right, the software bill of materials is a great first step. And we always say, I think one of our sayings that we have at Vigilant is, okay, I've got a software bill of materials, and now what? And exactly what you said. What do I do with that, right? And that's a lot of the confusion on the consumer side. When I say consumer, I mean consumer of software bill of materials. So I'll kind of use the term producer when I say producer of SBOMs, and then the consumer of SBOMs. The producer side, the generation, and all those things is where you get the SBOM, and we say, okay, I've got an SBOM, now what? I'm on the consumer side. If I jump and call that a hospital, for example, I'm getting all these SBOMs maybe. Today, that's not actually happening. We're working on that movement too, to get device manufacturers to provide those to hospitals more frequently and keep them updated. But okay, I'm a hospital, I'm getting these software bill of materials. But now what do I do with it? How do I make that actionable, right? And so again, the idea behind the Vigilant Ops platform is to take a lot of that heavy lift off the consumer side and allow the consumer to ingest, we call it ingest, the software bill of materials in an intelligent way. So you can look across your deployed devices, for example, on a network, and see where you're vulnerable at any given point in time, see the risk profiles of these devices, which you couldn't see before. The other thing you can do is you can take this information now that you have and go back to the manufacturer or producer of that software and ask them for patches, or make sure that they're patching in a timely manner. So if you're still running outdated software from a particular vendor, now you have the information to go to them and get updates, which again, didn't happen prior to SBOM. So there's a lot of, on the consumer side, a lot of uptake that's still happening. The producers are looking at providing a lot more information to consumers. So around, as I mentioned, patch information, we call it dispositioning of vulnerabilities. So if you know that a vulnerability is in your software, you can actually disposition that or mitigate that right in the software and provide that communication out to your customers. So you eliminate some of that guesswork. So for example, Log4j hits, or another Log4j hits, and your consumers all freak out because they're worried about if they're vulnerable. But you as a software vendor know you fixed that and you patched it and you communicate that through the SBOM to consumers. So that's another good use of SBOM and how it's being used today.
Fantastic. Well, it's really great to hear. Is it too early to talk about real world impact? I know there's a lot of privacy issues with you and your customers and what you can share, but any examples where you're helping, improve a healthcare posture or have even discovered a really potentially risky vulnerabilities?
Yeah, it's interesting, and what I can say is one thing that we know, and this is a kind of a scary fact, but if you're running software bill of materials in what we call the engineering environment or the producer side, and creating the software bill of materials and providing that to your customer. Believe it or not, it's you're missing vulnerability. So even though the SBOM is a great vehicle and we look at that as the kind of, I said, the security artifact, right? We've discovered at Vigilant that it's incomplete. And what we've done is we've added information to that system or that SBOM at runtime. So if you got a deployed device, you build it in your build environment, you deploy it to a system. Now the profile of that deployed system is different from what you built in your environment. Just that's the way software works. You build it one way, you compile it, you deploy it on a system. Now you've got software running out there that you didn't actually track on the software bill of materials. And we actually fill that gap. So we call that the deployed device SBOM and the build SBOM. We combine those together. So now you're not missing any vulnerabilities. And that's a big concern of ours, because I think folks out there still don't realize that if they're running just a build environment SBOM or a generated SBOM from the engineering side and providing that to the customers, they are actually missing vulnerabilities. And so that's one scary gap that we see right now. And we're trying to kind of fill that with education and getting customers to know that, hey, you really need this complete picture. You need both the deployed and the build side. So that's one good example of what we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does your go-to-market look here? You mentioned working with healthcare systems, hospitals. Do you collaborate with other entities like cybersecurity firms or technology providers, integrators? It's a pretty complex space, healthcare, these days.
It is, and yeah, that's a great question. We're not totally restricted to healthcare, as I mentioned. SBOM's kind of ubiquitous, so we kind of the first response to that is we do work with other industries and provide SBOM automation there as well. But we have lots of partners and across the ecosystem. So as you mentioned, it's a complicated environment. Folks are really trying to do their best to wrap their arms around, protecting their systems, protecting their networks, and we work with a lot of partners who provide additional things beyond the SBOM, like testing services and things like that actually kind of shore up the stuff that we do on the SBOM. So I look at the SBOM as kind of pulling all this information together. We work with partners who maybe have not started to gather that information. They help us kind of get that pool of information happening, and then SBOM gets built and we start to take it from there. So yeah, we have lots of partners across industry to kind of help us in those areas to get customers kind of up to speed. One thing that we notice, I know from a go-to-market perspective, you mentioned is that everybody is in their unique spot along the SBOM lifecycle journey. We have some folks who are really, really advanced and have been dealing with SBOMs for a few years. They know the lay of the land, and we have a certain way of working with those folks. There's also the opposite end of that, which is folks who are just hearing about SBOMs. And so we work with those folks as well to bring them up to speed. And depending on the need, we can work with those firms in different ways.
Fantastic. So we have Black Hat and DEF CON coming up. This will be a hot topic among many others. It sounds like you're maybe speaking there, or you're paying attention to those two events. But also, what is the big picture for many mission critical industries, not just healthcare? You think about, defense applications, or think about even smart home and, alarming and other applications where, potentially life-saving, life-impacting security issues might arise, public infrastructure. How do you see the big picture in this space evolving?
I see the evolution of SBOM specifically as being kind of like a supply chain support mechanism, right? If you look across the supply chain, my ideal world, the way I picture this is we would have producers and consumers along the supply chain using SBOM tools to make sure that what they're delivering and consuming is secure, and communicating that security mechanism up and down the supply chain. So at the end of the day, across any industry, across any supply chain, you have this visibility that you didn't have before. And I think we're still evolving toward that. In an ideal world, everybody would provide an SBOM. And so I knew there are big vendors today that we work with that are actually starting to provide SBOMs for their products, which is really, really important. It's a good start. those SBOMs still need to be consumed. And so we help, the platform does that. We pull those SBOMs in and align them. So as an example, if you're using a specific component from a large vendor and you happen to get an SBOM from that vendor, we can actually pull that into the system and align it with all the other tools that you're using, which is really, really important. Now we have this visibility instead of, again, and I used the black box analogy earlier, but if you look at an SBOM today and you've got software from a proprietary vendor without an SBOM, that's kind of a black box too. Unless you do some kind of reverse engineering of that executable, you're not going to get to the level of detail that you need for vulnerability monitoring. We do that today through partnerships because we say the source of truth is always the software vendor. So working with these vendors and getting these SBOMs in, pulling them into the system is kind of how we'll evolve this whole thing. And at the end of the day, we'll all be sharing SBOMs, producers, consumers, up and down the supply chain will have this visibility. And it'll kind of, I think the SBOM will kind of drop into the background as just an artifact that everybody's providing. I actually also thought, one of the things that I think about often is I can see a security sticker on products, right? Or a security label or some way to say my product is this secure, some kind of metric that says, this product is green and or whatever, right? And so for consumers, because you mentioned smart cars, phones. I mean, we've all got this stuff in our lives, embedded in our lives. We have no idea what we're deploying on our networks, right? And so we want to know that too. So I can see it even heading in that direction where consumers get involved and you have this kind of consumer information about security of specific devices or appliances or things that you're deploying.
Fantastic. And how do you get started with a customer? I mean, people are doing more with less. They're pretty much overloaded in IT and the CISO's office. Too much to do, too little people. How much time, effort does it take to engage on this topic with you or with your partners?
It's really, really straightforward. I mean, we make it as simple as possible. I come from that environment. I know these teams are stretched, right? If they're doing any kind of analysis today, it's all manual. They're spending their time perusing National Vulnerability Database and looking for vulnerabilities, and that takes a load of time. So if you've got a team of resources that are trying to make your product more secure, we already know that you're overloaded. So it's very, very easy to work with Vigilant. I mean, we come in right away. If you've got the tooling and you're generating SBOMs today, we can import those into the platform, no problem. It's very easy. It's an automated process. If you're not using any tooling, we have generators to help you. We can give you those and get you up to speed really quickly. And then once you're on the platform in that way, generating SBOMs, it's really a simple matter of getting them into our SaaS-based platform, which then we begin to monitor. So all the work, all that back-end heavy lifting, all the vulnerability monitoring happens from us automatically. There's alerting through the platform, so when a vulnerability hits. So now your team doesn't have to go out and look for vulnerabilities. They get fed directly, and it's product specific. So if you're in a big organization and you're working on multiple products, you can have a team that's looking at product A and they get alerting for those, and product B, et cetera. So we make it really easy and efficient. We have tools in the system that allow you to kind of, as I mentioned, mitigate and remediate vulnerabilities right in the platform. So again, that makes it really easy for the engineering team. So we're doing everything we can to make it a light lift for teams to onboard us, but then continuously go forward and make that, kind of take that whole burden off these teams. So we don't want it to be a problem for teams to get on board with us and then also to continuously monitor.
Fantastic. Give us a peek behind the curtain into the team, and you've recently been expanding, growing, fundraising. Tell us about what's happening behind the scenes.
A lot of really good stuff. I mean, so it's great. So with SBOM moving forward and kind of the whole thing's happening, this industry movement, and obviously all these breaches that are happening, it couldn't happen in a better time. We're really honored to have been chosen as a partner with Carnegie Mellon University's Scilab. So we have now access to world-class researchers and all the stuff that's happening at Carnegie Mellon, the good things that are happening around making cybersecurity even better. And a great partner with Carnegie Mellon is really going to boost our commercial efforts as well. We've hired multiple folks recently. We've got a marketing director out of Boston. We've got a sales engineer out of New York. We're really working hard, again, to try to get the message out there and kind of respond to the demand in the SBOM space. Lots of really good things happening for Vigilant, as I said, go. You mentioned Black Hat. I'll be at Black Hat.
Oh, great.
And speaking there, are you going to be at Black Hat, Evan, yourself?
I'm resisting, honestly, because Las Vegas in summer at 120 degrees is not my favorite place, but I might get sucked in. We'll see. Hopefully, if I don't see you there, I'll be watching some of the keynotes and sessions online. But folks, definitely reach out to Ken and Vigilant Ops. Congratulations on the amazing and important work you and the team are doing.
Thank you, Evan. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Look forward to